for any preacher within the Christian tradition than Easter Sunday. Christmas kind of flows pretty easy because it's been happening all around you for the last month, and there's a lot of good stories there to tell, and you don't have to say a whole lot without really stretching things too far. And then you find yourself preaching about Easter. And you find yourself preaching about the idea that someone who was dead and in a grave, no pulse, no breath, no nothing, came back to life and sat down, hung out with his friends, ate some fish, shook their hands, told them some stories, did a whole bunch of things, and then said, by the way, I'm going back to see my Father, and I'm going to go up into heaven, and then up he goes, he ascends into heaven. Now, why in the world would that be a difficult story to tell? It's the kind of thing we're used to hearing on a regular basis, so it's just something you talk about. No, it's obviously not. In point of fact, as I was preparing today's sermon, I said, Bob, you're preaching in a Unitarian church about Easter. Think about that one for a moment. The last time I preached on Easter was back in, I think, 2009. And most of you don't know this. Part of the reason that I'm no longer serve within the Episcopal Church is because I simply found I couldn't do it anymore. I simply found I couldn't do it anymore. Then I look at the service today and see, to my surprise, that in the Unitarian hymnal is Alleluia, Christ is risen today, which is about as orthodox a song about Easter as you could ever find. And I think it's absolutely delightful. Because my sermon title today is about mystery and meditation and also mythology and mathematics. And what I want to say, though I had not planned on starting this way, is that the mythology aspect of my sermon is that events occurred, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, that could not, cannot, will never be able to be communicated with words. And so what the ancients did in our tradition, all the way back to Genesis, the Jewish tradition, the Islamic tradition, within the Buddhist tradition, going back to the stories around Buddha and his Siddhartha's experience under the Bodhi tree, what all religions have done is they have created myths. You say, well, goodness gracious, what's the point of that? Why would you write a bunch of lies? Why would you write a bunch of fairy tales? No. Myths are not false. They are not unfactual. They are not legends or fairy tales. They are stories that have been passed down through time, which have resonated sufficiently from generation to generation that the truth underneath them continues to be communicated in a way that is, frankly, quite mysterious and mystical. Because the myths manage to communicate that which is beyond words. I want to share with you a reading from a book I've been going through the last few months, and I strongly recommend it. It's called The Second Mountain by David Brooks. Most of you know him as a political commentator in the New York Times and at one point in time on McNeil Lehrer. Brooks has written an utterly brilliant book about the second mountain, the second half of life, and as luck would have it, he tells the story of one of my favorite theologians, Frederick Buechner. And I have to read this because I can't do it justice without reading. By the time he was 27 years old, Frederick Buechner, already had published 2 novels and was well known. He moved to New York City to try writing full-time, but it didn't go very well. He got depressed and started thinking about other careers, maybe advertising. For no clear reason, he began attending a Presbyterian church on Madison Avenue, even though he found that most of the clergy preached out of their shallows, not their depths. One day he listened to a sermon comparing the coronation of Queen Elizabeth and Jesus. My guess is this was about 1952, right? The coronation. The preacher said that Jesus was not crowned amid splendor, but, and here he quotes, among confession and tears and great mocking laughter. Buechner writes that at the sound of the phrase "and great laughter," quote, "for reasons I have never satisfactorily understood, the great wall of China crumbled, and Atlantis rose out of the sea, and on Madison Avenue at 73rd, tears leapt from my eyes as though I had been struck across the face." I've read Buechner's, all of his books. He's a wonderful, wonderful writer. One of the things that Buechner says is that he's mystified by people that say that they talk to God on a regular basis. His perspective is that if they think that they can talk to God on a regular basis, they're either pulling the wool over their own eyes or over the eyes of the people they're talking to. From Buechner's perspective, one wakes up every morning and asks the question, is there a God? Most mornings the answer is, no, I don't think so. Especially if you look at the morning paper and see what's going on, you say, definitely, no, there isn't. But there are those moments for certain people that when they wake up in the morning, they say yes to life. Maybe they use the term God to express that. Maybe they don't. But they look at their life and they say, yes, this is wondrous. This is amazing. I am alive. I am alive. What more miracle do I need? I want to speak today about 2 different kinds of truth to kind of set this sermon into the context of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. First truth, objective truth. That's the one that made us confident that when we flicked on the computer, it would turn on. It's the one that when the wind blows and this building shakes, many of us have felt that, we don't worry that the building's going to blow down. We trust the architect, their knowledge of math and physics, and etc. And that objective truth causes us just to giggle and laugh about the wind. Now there's a second kind of truth, subjective truth. It's very different than the first one. It's not rooted in math or science or objective study, but it is absolutely just as real. I'll give you an example. I love Tracy. I warned her I was going to say that. And Tracy loves me. Prove it, Bob. Well, I act as kindly and lovingly as I can toward her. Not always perfect, she'll tell you. But I can't prove it. There is no mathematical theorem that I can use to prove that I love her. Nor is there one to prove that she loves me, or that you love each other, or that we as a community share in love. Love of friendship, love of family, love of people we may just met today. We cannot find words to express this. In fact, I'm intrigued by the fact that our religion, our gathering as Unitarians, is founded upon what we call the 7 principles. Poppycock. They're not principles. Math has principles. Geometry has principles. The things that we state, and you're welcome to read them again today, are not principles. They're statements of faith. They are unprovable, subjective statements about what we believe to be true about the world and how human beings are called to live in it. There are lots of reasons that we hold these truths, but they are inexpressible, those reasons. The great theologian Rudolf Otto, in his book, The Idea of the Holy, talks about what he calls the numinous, the experience that people have when they see the universe and are in utter awe at the majesty of it all. He talks about it as often happening as an experience of fear and trembling, or what's your New York accent, Bob? Or as an experience of awe and wonder. I want to go to today's scriptures for just a moment and point something out. In neither story did the participants see Jesus. They encountered Jesus. They encountered the mystery and the wonder, but they did not see him. And I think it's very important that we hold that thought. Paul, who was the greatest evangelist of the Christian faith, never saw a risen Jesus. I haven't either. What Paul experienced was this awe and this wonder and this mystery. And what happened to him was his life was turned around 180 degrees from persecuting and bringing with him letters, warrants of arrest for people who believed in Jesus. He was ready to physically arrest them, bound them, bring them back to Jerusalem, probably to be stoned to death, and all of a sudden, this man experiences something that causes him to be the greatest evangelist of this man, Jesus of Nazareth. The ladies who come to the tomb don't see Jesus. Well, you can say, well, Bob, that's because you didn't get all the way through to the end of the gospel. No, that is the end of the gospel according to Mark. Later on, a century or so later, the church was uncomfortable with the fact that it didn't talk about any appearances of Jesus, and so it added a little addendum on it. Something about this Jesus being physically present and eating fish and whatever. Ain't there. Mark's the first gospel. He ends it exactly where we heard, with women running away in fear and trembling. It doesn't stop with Christianity. It's true of all the major religions. Moses, experiencing God at the burning bush. Muhammad, in the cave, with the appearance of the angel Gabriel. Siddhartha, under the Bodhi tree, meditating and meditating until he could find such depth of truth and understanding that he would be called the Buddha. This is normative in our lives. This is normative in our religious traditions. Each of those traditions took those experiences and built a mythology around them, a story, because it was the only way they could communicate the incommunicatable. I read an interesting fact out of Brooks's book. He said Gallup did a study of Americans, and what they found were two interesting facts. One was that 84% of the people who live in America have had an experience like Paul, have had an experience like Rudolf Otto describes. All the experiences may have been different in different ways, but everyone said, yes, I've had an experience of wonder and mystery and awe where I felt a oneness with the universe that was beyond the ability to express in words. The second number is 75%. That's how many of those people never told anybody about the experience because they assumed people would either laugh or walk away slowly, making sure that they weren't attacked by the person who told them the story. Think about it. 84% of the people in this country have had an experience like Paul. 75% of them won't talk about it. Maybe part of the reason is because you can't talk about it. There was a man in Brooks's book, his baby was born, and he said, you know, when I looked down at my baby, my newborn, I felt a sense of adoration and wonder that far exceeded anything that evolution required for me to be an adequate parent. When my son Robert was born, it was the night of a school party. He was born about midnight. Of course, being a typical male, I left my wife and went to the party. She was sleeping. I went back to my house about 3 in the morning, and I sat on the stoop. And I was at a point of really wrestling with my faith. It's a long story. That night, I knew deeply that what I called God was real. Now, I have absolutely no desire in my heart to try and convince anybody of anything about God. I frankly find the word extremely annoying because whenever you use the word, images come into people's minds that have nothing to do with the intention of the speaker, whether it's Greg or me or anybody else. I think the Jews got it right. G-D. You can't pronounce it, doesn't say anything, and that's about the best way to do it. But the idea that life is mysterious, that it is beyond our understanding, that as Buechner says at one point, it's a story that seems to be going somewhere, that I'm confident in, however one expresses it, however one expresses it. My hope today is very simple, and my intent. Conversation, thinking together, searching for the words, sharing the experiences, dropping the association of objective truth with subjective truth, as if somehow I could prove what I believe the way that I can prove to you a mathematical theorem. It's just not only impossible, it's a stupid exercise that insults the intelligence of anybody you're talking to. For the number of people in this room, let's say it's 45, there are 45 different, unique, individual, personal understandings and experiences of life. And even husband and wife cannot fully understand the reality of each other's experience of life. But on this day of Easter, that we apparently still do celebrate as Unitarians, I think what we're invited to do is consider the wonder and the awe and the mystery and the glory and the majesty of life. Our lives, the lives of those we love, and I must say, particularly the lives of our children and our grandchildren.